Yo, what's going on, Time Clan? It is your boy King Tynex here, back with another video, and you guys already know the deal. The link to my Discord will be in the description below. I'd also like to thank Neptune for helping me with the planning process for this what if. And I just need to say like one more thing too. Um, as a sort basically like my sort of gratitude when it comes on to them helping me with like most of my last projects where I'm not even making sense. Basically, I would just like to thank Neptune for helping me with quite a bit of my latest projects throughout this year. And I would like to also mention that they do have their own what if that they're working on. The only thing though is that it's a bit of a big project considering that it's combining the worlds of DXD and Data Live or Data Live, however you pronounce it. And they're basically looking for a co-writer, somebody that can help them write write the story, basically scene by scene. She writes one piece of it, you write the second piece, all within the same time frame. And she's basically looking for somebody that will be fully committed to the project as well. So if you guys are really interested in said project, I would recommend you guys hit her up. I will leave their Discord tag in the description below as well. And yeah, I think we can now roll that intro. Relationships. It was honestly annoying at times for him. The only thing that he found to bring joy to his life was when one of his co-workers brought up this cool new RPG that everyone was playing. Satoru didn't see what all the hype was about at first. Then he started playing it and, well, he got addicted. During the weekends, he pretty much spent almost all of his time on just that game, building an army, being feared all across the lands, and even forming a team of similarly strong individuals. Unfortunately, all good things came to an end though. The online RPG was said to be closing soon. Satoru was disappointed, but he took the time to just see his online friends one more time, just be able to talk to them and find out what was happening in their lives. Once the clock hit dawn, he saw everyone leave, but for some reason he didn't. He looked around all of the frozen NPCs he and his crew created over the past months. A couple he decided to look at their settings a little bit. One that went by the name Albedo, succubus his friend created. He ended up reading their settings and realized something. She was, well, what succubi are known for. He made a pretty bold decision at the last second and decided to lower down her level of seduction just to a tolerable level. Hopefully that wasn't too drastic of a decision, especially considering the fact this was the last time he would ever see these characters, right? When he took a look back at the time, he noticed something was off. The game should have shut down by now. Why was he still there? And why did everything look so realistic? He was seeing everything in a different sort of perspective What What? Okay, let me stop. What was this? He took a look at his hands and saw that they were those of a skeleton. Not even just that, but they had the texture of bones too. There was no way. He looked around and saw Albedo standing next to him on his throne. Is something wrong? She asked. He almost squealed hearing her voice. Was she really having full-on dialogue now? This wasn't something NPCs usually did unless you approached them or something. Even then, that was also during cutscenes. This did not make much sense in his book. He asked where he was, and Albedo looked at him strangely. Well, you're in the throne room. You okay, Master? I'm fine. It's just that maybe I should check on how everyone is doing. Check on the progress of everyone in order to see that they are still being productive. He tried to explain. He walked through the rooms and ended up meeting up with everyone, while the rest of his teammates were still in the guild and not busy with their own personal lives. Satoru remembered discussing how some of the characters they created should have been what they wanted added to the guild in order to be their guardians and maids. From there, a couple of changes were made in the process. The first came with Shaltair. Overall, he liked her aesthetic except for one thing. He never liked the idea of having it to where the vampire lady would be so insecure about her size to where she would end up wearing something to make her chest look bigger. It just ruined her whole aesthetic in his eyes. The others agreed with him during her creation too, and that design was easily switched to where, well, it was completely real. She was on the smaller side, but it wasn't necessarily as small as it was originally. For a woman in the real world, that would be considered pretty average. He remembered the suggestion about creating a character by the name of Victim, and Rimuru, Satoru's online persona, while in the skeletal form anyway, found it to be pretty weird. He watched a lot of anime and read quite a bit of manga too, so he gave another suggestion instead of Victim. Why not a character by the name of Iris Height? A relatively strong character from another series that they could adapt into the RPG. They could even add in her alter ego that they decided to nickname Plutia. Well, her nickname was Pluti, but her full name was Plutia. Everyone was cool with it for the most part, since trying to make a character that was only ever really useful after their death seemed a bit pointless. It was like making another Sakura, but killing her off would be what made her useful. It seemed pointless in everyone's books, and they never regretted the decision. Ariel Omega was the name of the original maid they were going to make, but quickly scrapped since she was just a human maid. Sure, it would have been nice to have a human in all of this, but well, for some reason in this game, humans just seem to be a weaker race overall. Rimuru wasn't even the one to suggest this idea here, but another one of his friends who was really into DxD at the time. Since Rimuru suggested using another character from a previously created series, then they only saw it fair they suggested creating a character by the name of Ingville, a devil of sorts with powerful magical abilities. Heck, This girl could even control dragons if they really wanted her to go that far, like her light novel self. After looking up the character, it was a unanimous decision that Ainz would be added. Not only that, but Cocositis, well, how do you pronounce his name? Coquitus was replaced as well. Rimuru had to admit that the dude's concept was pretty sick. He liked the idea of Coquitus and all, but he figured that they could have gone, well, a step further than just that. Why not change his name to, I don't know, Zijin, and make him more Bud related? Make him the Black Knight of the Guardians. He even drew some concept art and sent it to everyone. Although there were some debates, the votes were in Rimuru's favor. Majority wanted Zijin instead of Coquitus. He reminisced about all of these memories. He wondered if his current situation was real or not, though, considering how hard it was to believe that he actually got isekai'd into the game. It was almost a dream come true, but at the same time, Rimuru needed to see the other characters in order to confirm his suspicions. If that were the case too, were there any other players isekai'd into the game? His interest had peaked here. He had requested Albedo to call for the rest of the members, gather them around so that he could see all of them. Albedo didn't even question him. She left his presence and went to gather everyone while he continued to simply walk around the place. He felt the walls and paid attention to how beautiful the scenery was. It was one thing to see it through a screen, but to actually experience it was, well, something else entirely. After a while, Albedo alerted him of the fact everyone was around the throne room waiting for him. Rimuru didn't even waste any time when he found out how quick they were to make their way to be in his presence. Moments later, he found his way to the throne that no one else dared to sit on. He looked at all of the guardians who kneeled before him. Stand up. I've really only called all of you here for, well, a status update. Why don't you start first, Demiurge? Demiurge wore a red suit and glasses. He had pointy ears, teeth, hair, and he had brown skin. He was the first one to look directly at Rimuru, whereas Ainz Albedo. He kept his words purely factual in front of his ruler. Rimuru found that to be pretty interesting. It appeared that Demiurge was a pure business sort of guy, intellectual as well. Even though he tried to keep it factual, Rimuru couldn't help but notice some of the grandiose words he used. He could tell this guy definitely would be one of the more eccentric characters here, while adding his intellect too. The next he called up was, well, Iris. Well, that was the form she was in at the moment anyway. He decided to not go with her nickname here since he wanted to keep up the act of this being purely business. The way she talked, though, brought chills up his bones. Everything that happened on the floor was intense. This girl was probably the most effective at managing her floor out of all, but that was purely through fear tactics. That kinda scared him in all honesty. It also made Rimuru wish he went with the first option, but what's done is done. He looked at Jaeger and immediately skimmed over him. He would need someone to decipher what they'd say later. Not worth your time, though. Shaltair was next. She spoke in an elegant manner, although there was something off about her. She was blushing for some reason while looking at him. How odd. Shaltair was pretty special with the fact she was running 3 floors, so to hear how well she was managing with extra responsibility, it honestly impressed Rimuru. That almost surpassed the sadist herself, Iris, in capability. Iris was just a small bit better, though, in his opinion. Zijin kept his words short for the most part while talking about his floor. Interesting. It didn't appear that Zijin was much of a talker, but from what he got, the Black Knight did mean business for the most part. The last ones were the twins. They were probably the most eccentric and talkative out of everyone. It lasted a whole 2 minutes before he had to request for them to stop. He had heard enough. From what he heard, the two were managing their floors well. Their floor well. He applauded everyone for their efforts. Next up on his list was investigating what this world was all about. He didn't feel like being cooped up in just this one area for the whole of his new existence. He made a mistake of not having much of a life and focusing purely on business in his old life, but this one he would make sure he used to the best of his ability. He wanted to know what this world had to offer and just how much chaos he could bring here as well. Maybe not chaos, but just how much of an influence would be a better way of saying it. The other one made him sound like a villain, which he totally wasn't, right? I mean, he was a good guy, right? The first thing he ended up doing in this new world was make a name for himself. He requested that Zijin follow him as they went exploring the different areas, and they ended up arriving in a village. It seemed like they were looking for a fight, though. Rimuru decided to let everyone know what he was really about, but Zijin offered to fight in his place. In Zijin's eyes, his lord had no need to even lift a finger with him here to protect him, especially against such weak creatures. Despite how much people trying to fight back against Zijin, none of their attacks did anything to him. Right when they thought they actually managed to do some damage against Zijin and began to have their hopes grow, Zijin quickly crushed it all by revealing the fact he was faking all along. This wasn't even fun for Zijin, to be honest, as he blitzed through the soldiers and forced the villagers to pledge their allegiance to Lord Rimuru for their own sakes. If they didn't, Zijin would have had no trouble burning this village to the ground for even attempting to fight them. He bowed to Rimuru right after. Rimuru was amazed at just how strong Zijin was. Something managed to catch the corner of Rimuru's sight, though. Rimuru swiftly dodged the attack from his assailant. As soon as Zijin saw this, he immediately lashed out against the whole group that dared to even lay a finger on his master. They introduced themselves as the Black Scripture, but all Zijin heard was a bunch of gibberish. All he heard was his heart beating in his head with the amount of bloodlust he held against these individuals. They were a pathetic group in his eyes. They weren't even a challenge in his book. A strong-looking male who looked to be in his 30s walked through the destruction brought upon the place and didn't know how to react. He didn't know who could have caused so much damage. In all honesty, it made no sense to him. He had yet to meet a strong enough individual to take down so many people all at once. It had to be a group, fallen soldiers and villagers alike. It made no sense to Gaza. Who would do such a thing? Why would they do such a thing? He approached the middle of the village only to see Zijin putting down the last of his enemies, and he approached the Dark Knight. Not just him, but Rimuru as well. He demanded to know the meaning of all this. Zijin looked over to Gazef's direction and glared. He dared to give orders to his master? He was about to end the life of Gazef as well, but Rimuru held his hand out, signaling for Zijin to stop. This interested Rimuru. The man didn't just decide to go in head first like all the rest and asked questions instead. He liked that. He would humor him for a little bit. Are these your men? Rimuru asked. Yes, what did you do to them? Gazef replied. Well, we casually strolled through the village, only to see villagers getting attacked by your men for some reason. They turned their attention over to us as well and tried to harm us for no good reason. In an act of self-defense, we were forced to put them down. Rimuru wasn't lying when he said this. He wanted to learn more about the world, and the first thing that happened was that he saw people getting chopped to pieces. In his mind, he was technically in the right to putting these guys down. Gazef was left to contemplate what he heard. While taking a good look at these guys as well, he realized something. They were not necessarily his men. Sure, they looked like combatants, but there were a couple of traits about them that just seemed off to Gazef. He apologized for his harsh stance against them earlier. Even looking at the bodies, he found that some seemed to be of a different species. Did these soldiers summon some of these guys? He had originally been called here in order to help against an enemy force, but he wasn't expecting something like this. It didn't even seem like he needed to lift his blade at all. He thanked the two for their work, although Rimuru gave more credit to Zijin, since he did pretty much all the work. Gazef wanted to shake their hands though. Zijin wanted to say something, but decided to hold his tongue when he saw his master had no issues with this. If his master was okay with it, then so was he. He gave Gazef a handshake as well. Rimuru suggested something to Gazef though. Something about putting the village within his protection for now in case another set of enemy forces ever came here. After all, Gazef saw what just one of Rimuru's men was capable of. Imagine if he had those sort of people there protecting the village 24/7 though. It sounded appealing to Gazef, so he ended up agreeing to it. Gazef didn't realize one thing though, and that was the fact Rimuru basically duped him into signing off the village to him. Rimuru wanted to take over the village, and he was basically given consent to do so. Just barely a day afterward, Lupus Regina Beta found their way to the village and marked it as that of Lord Rimuru's territory. Overall, their influence on the village wasn't anything too severe. The villagers became more careful of their words though, due to them finding out about one of her abilities. The ability, of course, being that she could turn invisible. They would usually appear right behind people in order to scare them, meaning that they could be behind anyone at any time. Simply listening, knowing that they worked for Rimuru, made them understand that they could never speak ill of the skeleton in fear of the consequences if Lupus Regina were there to hear them. Rimuru was getting daily reports of their progress within the village. It honestly got him excited to go on his next adventure in this new world. This time around, he requested the aid of Flutie, the more easygoing form of Iris. He'd much rather this form than the intense nature of Iris' height. He figured it would be a good idea to don an alter ego for now as well, get more intel from two different perspectives, and find out how this realm operated while taking it over. He chose to wear his adventure armor this time around. He'd be seen as an adventurer himself in whichever village he went to. Plutia would just be seen as someone accompanying him. Nothing more, nothing less. There was one issue when they made it into the village though. People apparently saw him as weak for the piece of metal around his neck. It was meant to represent his rank, and yet the lowest of the low at the moment. It was a bronze rank. He was disrespected by some dudes who looked to be on the rougher side. They had to be drunk or something. All it took was Rimuru flinging the one who tried to trip him away to let these guys know he was not someone to be messed with. He was going to make a name for himself here and show them the power of Rimuru. Although he would have to go by a different name here. He had to think of what it could possibly be though. He didn't have much of a chance to think about that though, since another interruption disrupted his thoughts. This time it was in the form of a red-haired girl. She seemed to be pretty angry for some reason. She was demanding retribution for destroying an item she had slaved several months for, a healing potion apparently. Rimuru almost wanted to laugh hearing how trivial the potion was in the long run. He handed her a new healing potion in order to replace the one he accidentally destroyed. This one should have been of a higher quality as well, considering it was red. Thankfully, that was enough to get the girl out of his hair. Oh wait. Bones, I guess you could say here. Where's Joker here? Rimuru would have attracted the attention of another group though. They weren't anything special though, just an average team of higher ranks for the most part. Well, according to the village anyway. They wanted him and Plutia to join their team, at least temporarily, in order to fight off a horde of monsters that usually came by the village. It didn't sound like all that important of a job in all honesty. The only intriguing part was the fact they'd be making a pretty good amount of money from doing this. The more enemies they slayed, the more they made. He didn't really have many other options here, and he couldn't read their writing either, so he guess he really had no choice. He decided to accept. With that done, they got into introductions. Rimuru decided to go with the name Ainz as his alias for now. He even took off his helmet, revealing an illusion of his former face to the men. To them he looked pretty average all around. A couple couldn't help but focus their attention onto Plutia though. They tried to flirt with her, but she was a bit of an airhead at times. Even her speech was a bit slow as well. She usually dragged out some of her words, and this time made no exception. Although these guys tried to ask her out, she acted almost as if she didn't hear them at all. She was hardly aware of her actions, but she pretty much brutally rejected these guys. They tried to take it in a stride, but their pride would never be the same. They could never accept the accursed friend zone. You guys seem friendly for the most part. Why don't we just start off like that? Yeah, Plutia pondered aloud. Although they agreed to the monster slaying mission, a change of plans was made. A boy walked into the tavern requesting the appearance of a black knight. Ainz was pretty much the only one who fit the description. The kid wanted him to be his escort, but Rimuru wanted to refuse, seeing as how he already agreed to working with a group of other guys already. The party looked at Ainz as if he was crazy though. After explaining the prominence of the kid before them, Rimuru still did not appear to care. They wondered if that was just because of the fact he was wearing a helmet or if he was genuinely feeling these emotions. A short time later, they decided to change their whole course of actions. Instead of monster slaying, today the group would instead be the escorts for a magically gifted boy. They were making their way back to Karn village, but on the way they encountered some obstacles. Pretty much just a couple of stepping stones for Rimuru though. Goblins and ogres attempted to attack the group, but Rimuru made quick work of his enemies. He didn't even give a chance for the rest of the group to show their fighting prowess. The fact he was able to do it so effortlessly too left the Swords of Darkness speechless. Just what was Ainz? It didn't seem like he was human. If they had to guess, he was at least on the same caliber as an adamantite class adventurer. Overall, the monsters were only a small inconvenience for Rimuru. By the time they made it to Karn village, they ended up getting the chance to meet up with a girl by the name of Enri Emot and what they at first thought was her goblin troop. It really wasn't, it was more so like they were just around her, and other villagers had decided to try and leave the village for a little bit, just to go sightseeing or anything. When she saw the boy the group escorted, she seemed excited to see him. She ran over to talk to him, and they went on to have a conversation about why the village was fortified. Apparently, a mysterious figure that went by the name Rimuru helped to protect the village and even resurrected their villagers as well, seemingly effortlessly. It was amazing to see. It was almost like he was a deity. The next thing on Rimuru's agenda though was taming a powerful creature that was rumored to be found within the woods. He wanted to investigate and see the monster for himself. If he defeated the monster, that would make for an easier time getting his name spread throughout the regions. The name Ainz would be feared all throughout the nations, and it would make getting information even easier. Not only that, but there was a chance more people like him were out there. The quicker he discovered these people, the better. After all, whoever had more knowledge had more power, or well, at least that's how we thought the phrase went. Plutia followed him into the forest, and they were immediately attacked by what seemed to be a large serpent. Their venomous fangs tried to sink into Rimuru's armor, but it couldn't break through. They tried doing the same to Plutia, thinking they were easier prey. Unfortunately, they made a pretty big mistake attempting this. Plutia was usually a carefree being, but a couple of things would usually upset her. One of these being someone attacking her, and another being someone attacking her lord. This snake did both. Her eyes twitched for a bit until her transformation took place Sailor Moon style. Rimuru immediately paled at the realization of what was happening. He should have just left her back at the village instead of having her follow him here. Now he would be forced to deal with her alter ego. Well, he felt bad for the wise king of the forest. He wasn't about to stay here, mad, and be forced to witness Ira's heart in battle. Yeah, ain't no way, boy. Ain't no way. Especially against something so weak. He teleported away, and just a minute later, Ira's heart came walking out with a giant hamster? What? He noticed the snake's head was actually attached to the tail of the hamster too. Wait, no way. This was the king of this was a wise king of the forest. This was a joke, right? He looked at the hamster's eyes and saw how much fear they held. He didn't even want to imagine just what Iris did to leave them in such a state. Show respect to your new master, Iris commanded. She put the hamster in front of Rimuru, and they immediately bowed to him as well. They begged for him not to hurt him too badly. They promised they would be good to him if he let them live. All Rimuru was thinking at the time was how terrifying this girl could be. After that adventure, they returned to Irantel, where Nafaria. I'll be honest, this name is hard. Nafaria and the Swords of Darkness ended up going to his grandmother's house in order to unpack the herbs they collected on the journey. There was a bit of an issue though, in the form of Clementine. When Rimuru ended up hearing about the fact Nafaria was missing, he immediately went to check on where he left him and the other adventurers who were meant to protect him. Instead of seeing the boy unpacking herbs, he saw what could be compared to a Tarantino movie. Bloodied corpses all across the floor. He noticed another thing extremely off with the members of the team he was working with for a short amount of time, being the fact their status plates were missing. He wondered who could have done such a thing and for what reason. He looked over to the messenger, the missing boy's grandmother, and requested that she hire him for this sort of action. She was astonished at first, but agreed to do it even when she heard his price. Anything for her grandson. With that, he stated he would collect this payment after the mission was finished. He contacted Nave in order to have her use the locator scroll so that she could find where the boy was. Once he heard about the location and what was there awaiting him, he informed the elderly lady of the fact there was an undead army being built up and it seemed like they were heading toward the village. If he were her, they would make sure to spread the news. With that, Rimuru left the village in order to make his way to the cemetery. Iris was with him too. She was excited since this would basically be one of the times where she would actually get to display some of her real power. She wouldn't have to hold back here. They found a couple of guards attempting to fight off the wave of skeletons, but they were incapable of handling the sheer amount of numbers. Rimuru was a different story though. He made a quick display of fighting off the army before getting deeper into the army. Once he was far enough, he switched tactics. He didn't want Iris wasting her strength on these plebeians either, so he used summoning in order to deal with these undead vermin. Although they looked similar, Ainz and the reanimated skeletons were not the same. He would let that be known here. A summoning was all it took to plow through the rest of the army. When he made it to one of the buildings, Rimuru met two people who introduced themselves as Clementine and what's his face? Khajiit? Man, forget his name. He was a forgettable character anyways. and Clementine Rimuru would deal with. As for Wentz's face, he was all for Iris. The girl licked her lips hearing that. The aura she released when Rimuru left the area made the man shiver. He tried summoning an undead dragon in order to fight her, but her physical strength alone was enough to shatter them. The man panicked and tried to summon another, but something was wrong. She was right in front of his face and her arm was extended, but where though? He looked down to see her arm was sticking through his chest, specifically where his heart was. She smirked sadistically when she saw that he realized what just happened. The girl didn't waste time at all. As for Rimuru, neither did he. He had read enough shonen manga over the years to know that if you let the main villain monologue, you'd be there for hours. He didn't feel like going through that, so he switched to his regular form and grabbed her. She tried to fight her way out of his grip, but it wasn't working for some reason. She tried clawing out his skull, but his grip only became tighter. More squeezing and blood began to rise up her mouth. She was desperate here. She even began to beg to be spared by Ainz, but it all fell on deaf ears. By the time Rimuru let go of her, she wasn't breathing. He would have spared her life if he saw some use for her, but he couldn't find any. This was only the beginning though. They were promoted from there, although he was expecting that he would have been hired for stunts back there. He contacted Albedo to get a status report on everything. The most important thing he heard throughout it all was the fact Shalter and Inkville were on a mission of sorts. On their side, it was a pretty boring battle. Bandits are trying to challenge Shalter's strength, and they ended up suffering the consequence being, well, death. Bring Unglas, one of the most skilled swordsmen of the group, was among those who made the mistake of trying to challenge her. For all of his confidence, he was unable to land a single strike on the vampire. He fled in fear. Shalter laughed at what she saw and was about to turn into her true vampire form, but Annie already knew what they had in mind. She suggested against that since Shalter seemed to be more unhedged in that form. It would be better to focus on capturing the man instead. Shalter muttered a couple of words before ultimately listening to Annie. That didn't mean she was sparing the rest of the people's lives here though. By the time they found him, he was curled up in a ball, clutching his sword. He was scared. He didn't want them to touch him. He wanted to flee once again, but there was nowhere to run. Shalter grabbed him by the leg, and Annie knocked him out. He was taken back to Nazarick, where he had to go through several sessions of torture before his loyalty was now with Lord Rimuru. He will be pleased to find out they managed to brainwash one of the kingdom's best swordsmen. At least, they hoped that was the case anyway. And with that, Titan Clan, that is just part 1. My gosh, my throat is dead, and yeah, you guys already know the deal. Like, if you liked the video, and if you liked the video, why not watch a couple of more other videos? You might like them as well. Like, maybe drop a like, maybe drop some comments as well. You know, to help with the algorithm. You don't really have to say much, just saying like what you liked about the story, what's your favorite color, those sort of things. Oh, and what else? Oh yeah, subscribe. Oh, and share, please. It is your boy Kintai next signing out. Peace.